6. There's David, we're online. Okay, we'll call this June 18th, 2024 meeting of the Salina Planning Commission to order. Daisy, did we post this meeting in accordance with the Kansas Open Meetings Act?
Yes, the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Dean, roll call?
Go ahead and call roll. Commissioner Farber?
Here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Padgett?
Here.
Commissioner Waters?
Here.
Commissioner Alt? Commissioner Van Covern? Commissioner Sydow? And Chair Mikesell.
Here.
So we have 3 absences, 5 members in attendance, 5 constitutes a quorum, and we provided notice of today's meeting, so we can move ahead with today's agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the June 4th, 2024 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes of June 4, 2024.
And a second?
I second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the June 4th, 2024 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. New business, Dean.
We have a carryover item from your June 4th, 2024 meeting, and that was a further continuation of applications. Conditional use permit 24-3. It was filed by GMC and Architects on behalf of Bruckner's Truck and Equipment, and you voted to continue your consideration of that item to today's meeting to allow the design team to complete some revisions to their plans for your consideration this afternoon. So I'm going to let Mr. Hurst summarize what those revisions are.
Thank you, Dean. So the location, as a reminder, is the southwest corner of the Waterwell Road and I-135 interchange. And the proposed project is a truck repair, service and sales facility of a little over 24,000 square feet on a tract that is 5.65 acres for a Bruckner's truck and equipment operation. And we've had a couple meetings. We had a May 21st meeting and a June 4th meeting and now a June 18th meeting. And in those previous meetings, we talked about the various elements that are required when you're looking at a conditional use permit, which this is. And instead of going through all of those, what I'm going to do is focus on the summary of site plan deficiencies and some of the items that the design team for Bruckner's and staff have been working through with the guidance that you have given us at the previous 2 meetings. So the first item that I'll talk about, and if you want to join along, you can turn to page 13 of the staff report, is the curb cut width of the proposed opening. And I gotta get my screen to cooperate here. So the code has a maximum curb cut entrance for driveways of 30 feet, but it does provide the city engineer and the engineering staff for the city of Salina to approve a wider opening if it is justified. And so what has happened is our engineering staff has been working with the applicant's design team and their engineer on designing a curb cut entrance that with what they call a truck turning template, showing how trucks would get in and out of the site. And the city engineering staff has approved a 40-foot opening. Now, when we looked at the site plan that was revised, we noticed that the opening was 43.5 feet. And when we looked closer at the truck turning template, we discovered that the 40-foot opening that was noted was from the edge of the front end of the concrete curbing apron to the edge of the curbing apron on the other side, rather than the face of the curb and the face of the curb. So what that means is the site plan would have to be modified a little bit so that it fits within the 40-foot opening that the engineering staff has approved. It would narrow the curb cut opening slightly, but not a lot. So here's the actual site plan, and if you were to measure at the property line, the curb to curb, the face of the curb to the face of the curb, you'd come out with about 43.5 feet, and so they'll need to narrow that to 40 feet, but that would still fit within the template discretion that the design team has come up with. So on the first item, we believe that we do have a solution, that we do have a turning template that shows a 40-foot opening would be sufficient. We just need the site plan to be modified to show the 40-foot opening that the engineering staff has approved, and that would take care of that. So the second item was the requirement that all maneuvering, driving areas, and parking areas have to be paved. And what the design team has done is they've modified their surfacing so that they've pulled the surfacing a little bit further to the west. In previous plans, the surfacing went all the way back to the back property line, with the exception of a green space that was in the southeast corner of the property. And what they've done is they've modified the paving or surfacing area to reduce the surfacing area, and rather than having a gravel or crushed milling surface, they've proposed a plan that has 8-inch thick concrete throughout the whole area. So as a truck works its way around the property, all of the maneuvering area as well as the off-street parking area will be paved with this new plan. Landscaping was the next thing that was talked about, and one of the challenges of the site was overhead power lines along Waterwell Road as well as I-135. And what the Planning Commission talked about at our previous meeting is allowing a substitution of ornamental trees in place of shade trees, so that those trees could be planted in the front area, the front yard area, which is going to be the front 30 feet along these frontages, and not interfere with overhead power lines. And so what the applicant has done is they've revised their landscape planting plan so that they have trees that surround the property on all 3 frontages with trees, and they've used ornamental trees instead of shade trees because of the overhead power lines. So that sufficiently addresses the comments that we previously have on landscaping and the landscape plantings. For drainage, there was a drainage study that was needed as part of the platting of this property, replatting of this property in 2023. And what the applicant has done is they submitted a copy of a drainage study to the Kansas Department of Transportation for their review. There has been a staff individual with KDOT who's opined on the plan, but we still do not have what we call a KDOT right-of-way discharge permit, which is what is always required when we have right-of-way adjacent to a property in which water is being directed to the right-of-way. And those discharge permits ensure that we don't have erosion or water that would overcapacitate the right-of-way drainage system of KDOT in this case. And so we do have a written email correspondence from an individual with KDOT that says that the plan looks good. So we are on the right track there, and we are needing as a next step an actual permit, discharge permit, showing the plan to be approved by KDOT. And so we've made progress in that area, but we haven't quite got the full permit that's going to be required before a building permit can be issued. But staff believes that's something that can be worked out after this board meeting as a part of a building permit process. The next item was dealing with the building elevation drawings. And previously, we had building elevation drawings that were color renderings of what was presented, or what was constructed rather, in the city of Hayes. And during the meeting, the design team indicated that that same color scheme, which is a gray wainscoting around the base of the building, and then a white main body of the exterior throughout the rest of the body of the exterior, would be what is being proposed in this case. All of those exterior materials would be of a vertical medical siding variety. And I'll see if I can, I'm trying to get to my drawings here. It's not, give me a moment. So this was the color photograph that was presented to us, and this is a picture of the facility that was constructed in Hayes. And you can see that the entirety of the building has a metal exterior to it, with the base being a gray charcoal color, the parapet also having a gray charcoal color, and then the body of the building being a white color with some signage on it. And this is the color rendering. Here is that same submittal, and so you can see that both the front facade and then the surrounding facades also have that same characteristic, where they have the gray wainscoting and the white upper body exterior color to it. These are the black and white images of all four sides there. So that's the exterior that is being proposed, and we feel the applicant clarified that well in their last meeting. Then the seventh item to address would be that a sidewalk, public sidewalk along Yost Drive would be required, and the applicant has that on their plan and is proposing to construct that. And then last of all, we need to make sure that all drawings that are submitted for building permit review have an address that notifies this property as 3615 Yost Drive. And so those were all of the different correction items that we've been working with the applicant on. We believe that they have been sufficiently addressed or nearly addressed where the Planning Commission could approve the proposed plans, and the minor details that are still left to be corrected can be taken care of through the building permit process. So therefore, we do have a recommendation that the plan be approved with a number of conditions. Those conditions are listed on page 16 and 17. As part of because this is a planned development, not only do we review this as a conditional use permit, but anytime we have a planned commercial project, the Planning Commission reviews and approves what we call a final site development plan. And so that will also be required here. In this case, the information that has been submitted is the same information you would have on a final site development plan, so we don't feel like that. We feel like you going through this conditional use permit review is the same as going through a final site development plan review. However, we need an actual document at the end of this process that is labeled as a final site development plan that we can stamp approved and put in the file. And so what that would look like is the site plan with the landscaping on it and a label that just says final development plan, Bruckner's Trucking and Equipment, and that's on condition 3. Everything else there, I think, is been addressed through my presentation. But if you have any questions, please let us know, and we'll take any that you might have. But our recommendation is approval with the 10 conditions that we've listed on 16 and 17.
Questions of staff?
Dustin, could you expound on condition number 6, please? I didn't catch.
Sure. So anytime we have a building that is constructed in a situation where water runoff can be sensitive, it's sometimes wise to add a condition where guttering and downspouts are constructed as part of the building to make sure that water goes where it needs to go. In this case, if we were to look at the drainage plan, I'll pull it up. So this is the drainage plan. I don't know how well it shows up, but all of the building water runoff and the pavement around the building is designed to work its way either to the north and then to the west, to the south and then to the west, or even to the east, south, and then west. So this blue line that you see here, the site is going to be graded and constructed so that water will flow from this blue line to Yost Drive. And underneath Yost Drive, we have an inlet system with pipes that takes water, it captures it, and let me get the aerial photo. It captures it, and this big burrow pit drainage detention area back here is designed to hold water in drainage and in storm drainage situations. So water gets to Yost Drive and it gets piped back to this Burrow Pit detention pond at the southwest corner of the Yost addition. And so that's how drainage on the site is designed to work. Where most of the drainage is directed to Yost Drive. However, there is this eastern portion here that is intended to sheet flow over into the KDOT right-of-way undetained, and that's what we need the discharge permit from KDOT for, because they've always required that for any instance when water is being directed onto their right-of-way. And so, as it's kind of getting to be a long answer, but the idea is that we get water going where it needs to go. So in this case, we would capture the runoff from the building and make sure that it's going to the west, to Yost.
And that was my disconnect. When it was funneling toward Yost, I wasn't sure about the discharge or the extra permit from KDOT, but
Yeah.
I see the backside of it. I got you.
And Dustin, I kind of have a question along those lines too. So that area that they changed from that had originally been pavement or some kind of multi-surface material.
Sure.
Is that going to be green space now?
Yeah, so if we were to zoom in here, all of the patterned area that you see, the shaded area, that is pavement. That's going to be 8-inch concrete. And once you get to the east of this black line where you have the white open area, that's going to be turf grass.
Okay. Very good. And that'll slow down that water flow.
That will slow down the water some, yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions of staff?
On the KDOT right-of-way discharge permit, to your knowledge, can the individual from KDOT that said, yes, your plan is good, is he the one that would issue that?
We're not sure about that,
Okay.
which is why we're not sure it came from the right source. The other part that we would like KDOT to clarify is if we looked at an aerial photo of the whole I-135 corridor, we have about 15 detention ponds that drain into the KDOT right-of-way. And this is the only project that we're aware of that KDOT has supposedly said okay to without a detention pond that controls the release. And so the email that we have is not really sufficient because in every other case, they said you can only do controlled release out of a pond, and in this case, they didn't say that. So we want to try to get that clarified. But if you go up and down, you have Long MacArthur, Ford, and Marshall Motors has a pond, and they discharge. Menards has a pond, they discharge. Walmart has a pond, and they discharge. And Olive Garden, there's a pond behind there that discharges. There's one behind the Goodwill store that and in every case, KDOT says you can only discharge out of a pond. You can't just drain your site into the right-of-way. So the reason that we think we're on good position, but we want to verify that through the right-of-way discharge permit, because that will have the details with it, and we know it will come from the person in the right authority. Every one in the past that we've had is from the District 2 engineer.
Oh, okay.
And this email is not from the District
Right.
2 engineer, so.
So let's say that we do go through the process and the commission approves this, and you find out later that there is a detention pond needed. Is that something you guys could handle internally, or would
Yes,
that be?
because the area is going to be the same. It's already shown as a grassy area, so it's
Okay.
not a change. It's just a matter of whether it's going to function.
Sure.
If you go back to the landscape plan. And so I kept looking at the landscape plan, and I kept saying, this must be a detention basin. And I kept saying, is this a detention basin? The answer kept being, no. We don't propose a detention basin, but if KDOT is approving this without one, we just want that spelled out in a right-of-way permit, because that that's different than what they have done historically up and down I-135 and I-70. Even out there where Foley Equipment and Kenworth is, there's a pond out there, and that discharges into the I-70 right away, and they would only accept discharge from a pond. So
This is a pretty small area, though. Relative.
Can I jump in real quick and just add a little context?
Absolutely.
I'll be sure to contact KDOT and see what they say. I think that the reason why they're not, right now, the water on that site is all headed towards I-35, and we are discharging at a slower rate than it's leaving now. So that's why I believe they're saying that they don't need a pond, because it's leaving the site at a slower rate for the drainage study than it is now. So
Nick, worst case scenario, if KDOT says that you have to have a pond in there, you could work with staff and get that
yes,
done? Okay, very good.
yes.
Thank you. Any other further questions of staff?
Hey, this is a clerical question, and forgive my ignorance, but why are some of these answers in red and some of them in green in this
Right.
paperwork?
Yeah. Approved or not approved?
Yeah, so I tried to make it easier to read, and maybe it made it worse, but says, so below is a list of issues of how Bruckner's design team has addressed each item. Items colored in green have been satisfactorily addressed, while items colored in red are still needing to be worked out. So that's the idea, is that I went through the list that we previously had, so I didn't change the list, but I did add in there the red items that still might need a correction, even if it's slight. Like the first one here,
Right.
the driveway opening is 43.5, needs to be reduced to 40. That's really simple to do. Like that won't take much on the design team's part to modify. And then the green ones they don't need to change it at all. While the red, like the KDOT right-of-way permit, we do have indications from KDOT that they've approved the plan, but we actually need the actual permit that they issue us when they do approve it. And then on 8, just notifying on or labeling the plans and indicating that the address of the property is 3615 Yost Drive, so that is consistent with what it's going to be addressed is the other item. So,
And
yeah,
I saw that in there, when you said
I
the
apologize for
curb
making
cut
that
was
more
good.
confusing. I was trying to make it easier, as these things are addressed, these things still need a little
Right,
tiny
right.
tweak.
I appreciate the colors. That's
Okay.
nice.
All right.
I have another question.
Further- go ahead.
Number 7, where it says the sidewalks needed, is that because of the C7 district? And does the trucking place 2 sites down have sidewalk on it already, or?
Yeah, so if we were to zoom in on the site plan. Oh, what did it do? Well, when I zoom in, it's getting weird on me. It's giving me some lines. But there's a sidewalk right here behind the property line that's being proposed, or right in front of the property line, off the property line in the right of way that's being proposed. And that is required for all new development.
On the development?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all new subdivision, that's a new subdivision, requires public sidewalks on public streets. The only exception to that is if you have a cul-de-sac or dead-end street that's 600 feet or less. So if you're in a residential subdivision and you've got a cul-de-sac that has 4 houses on it or something, they're not required to have a sidewalk. This is a dead-end cul-de-sac street, but it's 1,500 some feet long, and so it's required to have sidewalks. And what we do is we don't build sidewalks at the time the street is built. We wait till after the building is constructed to build the sidewalks, because if you build the sidewalks first, they'll get destroyed while the building is constructed, and you'll end up having to rebuild them anyway. So sidewalks in new subdivisions are built as lots develop.
What's the requirement for size on the sidewalks?
They are required, if they're a curbside sidewalk, a minimum of 4 feet. Some of them are 5, but if it's a curbside sidewalk, which we discourage, then those have to be 5 feet.
And so this is 4 feet because it's off the property line, not next to the curb. So it meets the minimum requirement. So a 4 foot for if it's not on the curb, 5 foot if it is on the curb.
Because I don't feel safe on a 5-foot sidewalk that's curbside, and I certainly wouldn't feel safe at 4 feet. But if you want to feel insecure, walk up the sidewalk on the east side of South Ohio Street that's right behind the curb and have the cars coming at you at 40, 45 miles an hour right next to you, and the sidewalk doesn't provide much sense of security, so.
Yeah, so you can see this is the property line over here, and you can see the sidewalk is separated. There's a buffer between the curb and the sidewalk.
Okay. I think it was the Foley equipment one where it was the sidewalk to nowhere type of thing, and I wasn't sure if there was any other sidewalk around, if it was just going to be in front of them.
Yeah, that was with the Beck's Seeds project out there, but that
It's further
was,
away.
Yeah, that was addressed at a different level than this, because the streets out there, Yost Drive is a full curb and gutter street that meets all city standards. The only thing that needs to be complete is the sidewalk. And so otherwise it meets all city standards.
Any further questions of staff? Okay. Can we hear from the applicant or their representative? Nick, is that you?
Sorry, I have nothing further.
Okay. And you've seen all 10 of the recommendations that the staff has made in terms of this application?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're okay with those?
Yes.
Any questions of the applicant? All right. Anyone from the audience care to address this application? Do we have anybody on the line, Dustin?
Everyone online would be part of the Bruckner design team.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion and action.
I'm excited for this project, so let's get it going. I make a motion, we approve this application, which is CU 24-3.
With the 10.
I'm sorry, with the 10 suggestions that are listed on page 16 and 17 in this packet.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve application CU 24-3. And this is the third time we've seen this, so we think it's a charm. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Go forth and build.
Promise this won't be on your next agenda.
Hooray.
Yeah. Okay. Legislative matters.
There's a couple things that we're working on that will come out of our seasonal fireworks stands this year. We're looking at tweaking the language on the distance that a stand has to be from residential property. There's not, it's not consistent. Sometimes we use the term property use for residential purposes. Sometimes we say residential zoned property. Well, we have a lot of vacant property. We have parks, we have churches, we have 40-acre school sites that are zoned residential, and that the intent was to keep fireworks stands separated from houses or housing and not necessarily all residential property. So we're looking at that, and we may bring something back for you to look at and perhaps initiate. And then another thing we're looking at is we have a table at the front of our zoning ordinance, and that the state legislature has stated that if somebody applies for like I-2 zoning and you don't feel comfortable with that, you can vote at that same meeting to do I-1 instead without new notice, new hearing, all that. We noticed in looking at that table that we haven't included some of our recently created zoning districts like our public use district, so we'd like to bring that table back for you to look at in the future to update and tweak with our new zoning districts. So those are a couple legislative things we're looking at that we may bring to you on the the July 2nd meeting to initiate, but we're not quite ready for those yet.
Very good.
But those are, when we say legislative matters, none. For those newer commissioners, legislative matters is if we're looking at our city code and there's something that's outdated or needs to be fixed, or that the commissioners would want us to look at in terms of current rules that don't make sense, then those are addressed through the legislative part of our agenda. So we just haven't had many of those lately because we've been really focused on the land use stuff.
Very good.
So those might appear as preliminary discussion items on your next agenda.
And speaking of preliminary discussion items, we have none, and administrative items, we have none. Unfinished business, Dean?
What I would let you know, even though it's the week of 4th of July, we're hoping most people will take the time off after instead of before, but we do have a meeting the July 2nd before the 4th of July, and we have a fairly significant project that we have on your July 2nd agenda, and the Salina Airport Authority is looking to annex, zone, and plat the area that's south of, across the street from where Salina Vortex is. So there's about 80 acres at the southwest corner of Waterwell and Centennial, and they're looking to kind of do a mirror image of the Airport Industrial Center on the other side. So we'll be looking at a plat, a zoning and annexation, and they have a warehouse project that they're looking at doing there, so that would be associated with that. And then for those of you who have been looking for the farmers market that used to set up at Waters True Value, there's been a change in ownership and operation there, and so they've been looking for a different site, and they have come to agreement with Central Mall to put their farmers market in the parking lot there, so that will come to you at your July 2nd meeting as well.
Very good. Pretty.
So the project at Waterwell and Centennial, it's not in the city limits today, so there'll be annexation, zoning, and platting that you'll be looking at all at once. And we've had some discussions with the county about the ownership and maintenance of Waterwell Road, so we'll be discussing that with you a little bit too.
Good. Sounds like a pretty aggressive agenda for the 2nd.
Yes.
Public forum. Do we have anybody online or
We
anybody
do not
in the?
have anyone online from the public, so anyone from the public who's interested in speaking would be in the room.
And, gentlemen? Okay. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about public forum. Last weekend, we happened to be in Des Moines for an Ironman race up there. And in Des Moines and West Des Moines, sometimes I think that our landscape rules are too stringent. And when we were driving through West Des Moines and it kind of transitioned into Des Moines there, it had a really nice cohesive look, and the landscaping was all very, it wasn't in your face or anything, and it wasn't overdone, but the first thing you saw was nice motorways that were lined with green space and trees and shrubbery, and everything was very attractive. And then as you got closer to businesses and things, you could see what they were, but there wasn't a lot of really tall signs. And anyway, the look was very nice. And don't I remember that your mom, did she not work in Des Moines as a
Well, I was
planner?
born in Des Moines and lived there most my early life, and I just got back from Des Moines visiting my mother, who still lives there. So it's, but West Des Moines and Des Moines are two very different places.
Yeah.
Des Moines is landlocked and an older historical city, and West Des Moines is brand new and growing, and so there's a different character between the two, but West Des Moines is pretty aggressive with their green space and landscaping, and they like boulevards.
Yeah, and it was very attractive, and wayfinding was very easy. And it made me think, of what we do here, and sometimes when the applicants think, that the rules are too stringent, and sometimes I do too. Well, that gave me a different perspective of that. So I guess take a look around next time
The
you're
only
around.
thing I would point out different is that both the climate and the precipitation is much different
Yep.
in Des Moines than it is here.
Yep.
It's not nearly as hot, and they get a lot more precipitation. We were looking at an arboretum up there, and my wife said, "What is this grass? I've never seen anything like this." And I said, "That's called bluegrass." And when I lived in Iowa, I didn't know what fescue was. I'd never seen fescue before. And so in Salina, everyone has fescue, but in Iowa, everybody grows bluegrass, because with the climate and the precipitation there, bluegrass does quite well. But if you tried to plant bluegrass here, it would just burn up and turn brown. So.
Yeah. And granted, in West Des Moines especially, there's so much new development there that it makes the landscaping stuff pretty easy to maintain a cohesive look. I know we have a lot of infill type stuff, and we have older businesses and we have newer ones, but anyway, it validated, I guess, some of the stuff that
Yeah, I mean,
we do.
a lot of we don't, ours is somewhat formula-based, but we're not aspiring to be West Des Moines, but when we look at these projects, we're trying to apply some of the same principles, and so the focus is on the front yard and having a buffer area and green space between the street and the development. And so when we talk about front yard landscaping, that's mostly where our focus is, and try to get some of that streetscape look along our corridors. So.
Very good. Okay, if there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. We are adjourned.